Our Plan of Care webinar training today. This is the second installment of our webinar series. Our first installment was the webinars on the HCBS workflow. We've recorded those webinars and they can be found on our MCTAC website. But this afternoon we're going to focus more on the Plan of Care and the template and the different elements that are contained within the Plan of Care. So with that, I'm going to get started. And again, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Meg Buyer. I'm a social worker and I work for ICL in MCTAC. You'll be hearing shortly from my wonderful colleague Alam El-Badou, who is also a social worker and works for Casa Columbia in MCTAC. Just so everyone knows, we're both social workers. We've just been licensed by different states, so that's why it's reflected differently on the slide. Okay. So what is MCTAC? MCTAC stands for the Managed Care Technical Assistance Center. We are a training, consultation, and educational resource center that offers resources to all mental health and substance use disorder providers in New York State. Our goal in offering this is to provide trainings and intensive support on quality improvement strategies that includes both business, organizational, and clinical practices to achieve the overall goal of preparing for and assisting providers with the transition to managed care. So again, some of you might be familiar with MCTAC. That's wonderful. For those of you who are not, I want to encourage everyone to visit our website at mctac.org. There's a lot of former trainings that we've done, prior trainings that have been recorded, webinars that have been recorded, posted on our website under tools and past events. We have a bunch of tools and resources that we'll probably talk a little bit more about towards the end. But again, this is just in general what MCTAC is. Also today, I just want to emphasize that if you have any questions, you should tap them into the chat box. We'll do our best to answer them. We do have one of our state partners, Joe Swinford, is on the line with us today. So at the end of the webinar, the three of us will do our best to answer your questions. And anything we're able to not answer today, we'll work to get answered in the future. So again, these slides and the recording of this webinar will be available once we've completed the webinar on next week. We are doing each of these webinars twice, so we do not post the slides or the recording until they have been offered twice. So you'll have to wait a couple days before the slides and webinar will be posted. So thank you for that question. Okay. So who is MCTAC? MCTAC consists of a dynamic partnership and collaborative partnership between the McSilver Institute for Poverty Policy and Research, which is housed out of the Silver School for Social Work at NYU, as well as Casa Columbia. MCTAC also has a variety of partners, including both provider and advocacy organizations that span all across New York State and bring to the table a lot of rich perspectives in various areas of expertise that really assist in the delivery of different areas of content for our technical assistance. Okay. So again, before I pass along to my colleague Alam, I just want to emphasize today that this entire webinar will be recorded. It will be posted eventually on the MCTAC website along with the slides. And we also know that with the Plan of Care HCBS process, there are ongoing discussions, and that MCTAC, we are training today on the Plan of Care as it exists today. If there are any changes or updates, MCTAC will be sure to update both of our website as well as send out an email update via our listserv. You know, there will be future trainings around these services. They're not announced or finalized yet, but once they are, we always list them on our MCTAC upcoming events site. So just again, a little plug for our MCTAC website. You can go there and familiarize yourself with the different content, resources, tools, and trainings. And with no further ado, I'm going to pass along to my colleague, Alam.
Thank you, Meg. So we're going to move on to the next slide, which is going to jump right into our checklist. And the checklist is going to go through some of the federal adult behavioral health HCBS person-centered planning process requirements that should be included throughout the plan of care. So this is a repeated theme throughout all of our webinars, ensuring that the individual is included in the making of this plan and all elements that go along with it, providing the client with the information and support to ensure that they can direct the process as much as possible. They should be involved with each step throughout this plan. In addition, that it's timely and occurs at times and locations that are convenient to the individual. This is all about ensuring that the client is the center of this plan and ensuring that they are being accommodated as much as possible. In addition to that, reflecting the obvious cultural considerations, ensuring that the language of the plan is something that the client fully understands and is able to actually use this as a tool, which is what it's meant to be. So the language is very, very important to stress on. In addition to that, including strategies for solving conflict or disagreement within the process. So outlining these things that the client can use as tools to move forward with their plan of care guidelines. We're going to flip over to the next screen, and Meg is actually going to go through this piece of the checklist.
Thanks, Alam.
Sure.
So again, just reviewing some of the requirements or characteristics for the adult behavioral health HCBS person-centered planning process. The first one, again, we're just going to summarize. It's a lot of text on the screen, and these slides will be available later on our website. But really, that's talking about conflict-free, and that the state has helped to develop mitigating factors to deal with this, and that care managers are going to be working on, as you know, developing this plan of care. And again, making sure that this process is really driven by the client and involving the client at every step of the way. So offering informed choices to the individual regarding the services and supports that they receive, talking to them about their options and their choices, including a method for the individual to request updates to the plan. So really communicating to the individual what the process is for updating their plan as they feel they need. And we actually talked a little bit about that process in our last webinar on how to update the plan of care. So I would encourage you to visit our website and review the slides for that. And finally, that it's important that the plan of care records the alternative HCBS settings that were considered by the individual. We talked a lot about this in the prior webinar, but this is really about conflict-free and making sure that we demonstrate to the individual all of the options that are available to them and that we document this in the plan of care. It's a very critical component of this process. Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual federal requirements for the adult behavioral health HCBS plan of care. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. They're very text-heavy because we're actually going to be reviewing a template that encompasses all of these federal requirements in a few slides. So I'm, again, not going to spend a lot of time on these. The state circulated this information recently, so we included it in our PowerPoint, and this presentation is going to be uploaded to our website in the coming days, and you could use this as a resource to kind of look through and talk through. These elements, again, they're federal regulations. They do need to be included in the plan of care, either incorporated into the existing health home plan of care or utilizing the following template that we'll talk about and we'll review in its entirety. And again, just to stress, these are the elements that need to be included for the HCBS plan of care. So I think we're going to start reviewing the template for the plan of care, and I'm going to pass along to my colleague Alam to talk through the first few elements.
Okay, so this is the overview piece of our template. So I just wanted to ensure that everyone is aware that it is a long application, but at the same time, it really does incorporate a lot of the information that was gathered through the assessment process. So the care manager that's actually conducting the assessment piece, this is why we were strongly recommending that it be the same person, so that way that information that was gathered then in collaboration with actually formulating the plan of care, it's a lot easier to plug in a lot of these areas. So starting off with just reviewing the outline of what the future sections are going to entail. So we'll move on to the next slide and actually show you section 1, which is going to reflect the demographic information, which is pretty basic, right? A lot of our assessments, applications, and so on and so forth include this basic information for the client: name, date of birth, address, Medicaid number, all of the information that makes it easy for us to contact the individual when it is needed throughout this process, okay? So the next slide is going to discuss some of the clinical and non-clinical needs and services at the time of the assessment. So this piece is going to list down all of the services that the client is involved in, right? Going from medical needs, behavioral needs, social service needs, and these little boxes that are running across the document are the specific elements that should be included for each and every service that the client has disclosed at the time of the assessment. So for a medical need, it could be anything. It could be, let's say they're receiving, something pertaining to their diabetes medical need, discussing with the client, well, what's the service that you're receiving with regards to your diabetes diagnosis, the provider that you're actually seeing, which organization are they tied to, their address, phone number, email, everything that the client can provide you with, you want to include in this section. Same goes for the behavioral health and along with the social service needs. This, in essence, is supposed to be a central document that really is all-encompassing to what the client is involved in as far as services go. We're going to move on to the next slide, which Meg is going to actually delve a little bit deeper into.
Thanks, Lom. So Section 3 and Section 4 are what we're going to review on this slide. Section 3 really is just all about eligibility for various HCBS services. So this is the section that ties directly back into the brief eligibility assessment that deems whether a person is eligible or not, and if eligible, whether they're eligible for Tier 1 or Tier 2 of the behavioral health HCBS services. Now, just for a tiny refresher, if they're eligible for Tier 1, that means education and employment and peer services. If they're eligible for Tier 2, that would mean they are eligible for the full array of HCBS services. Now, looking at Section 4, these are the recommended behavioral health home and community-based services that an individual might be eligible for. So this is what the care manager will be working with. Once they do the full assessment, they will mark down on here the recommended behavioral health and home and community-based services that the individual might be eligible for. And again, documentation is very critical and very important, and this is the area of the plan of care, this template that would be included on. Okay. So our next section is Section 5, and it's interventions. And really this is the section that we need to document and include all services, inclusive of both HCBS, social, and medical, that an individual is eligible and enrolled in. And if you can see at the bottom, a lot of these sections, right underneath that table, there's this blue print that says click to add more information. Many of the sections of this template have that. So if there are not enough rows, I know this is a tiny little logistical thing, you can always click and add more to this individual's plan of care. As Alam mentioned earlier, this document is really a collaborative and integrative plan of care that encompasses all the services an individual is tied in with. So we really want to be sure to be inclusive of every service that an individual might be receiving. Okay, next. And the next slide, this is Section 6, I'm talking about goals, preferences, and strengths. So really, if you think about it, I'm going back to the workflow presentation, but we really do talk about all of the different assessments that need to be done. And after you complete the full New York State Community Mental Health Assessment, there will be many conversations and discussions around goals and preferences and strengths. And so there will be a lot of content to include in this portion of the plan of care. So really thinking about this as talking to an individual about what they're interested in, what their goal is, what they'd like to achieve, what their preferences are, and really having that conversation as, again, we want to emphasize this plan of care process is truly client-driven. Okay. So with that, I'm going to pass back to Alam
Okay. So in section 7, we're going to be talking about the risk assessment and mitigation strategies. This section is really meant as a crisis prevention plan. This is in order to identify any potential risks and ways to mitigate that risk by planning ahead, which is something we definitely want to empower the client to do, to continue to be aware of the possibilities that may be their personal triggers or their personal issues that may come to light and what to do about them, how to be proactive. So the first section talks about, or the first piece of that section talks about, what are my triggers? So identifying people, places, things, and how they do upset the individual. So that way to shine a little bit of awareness on what personally they have that could potentially be a trigger. What activities can I do to feel better? You know, is it something like taking a walk, listening to music, give some suggestions there, but each individual is going to have their own strategy to mitigate the situation. And then who can I call for support? You know, is it someone that, you know, is in my 12-step group? Is it the care manager? Is it, you know, a friend or a family member? You want to jot those down here, talk about the relation, and then the contact information that, that can be made accessible to the client in times of crisis. And to the care manager themselves as well. Okay, we're going to move on to the next slide here, and Meg is going to talk about this one.
So I'm just going to talk about, again, so this whole section encompasses just different risk assessment and mitigation strategies. And the prior slide really talked about, you know, becoming aware, having that conversation with the client about what the triggers are, who their resources are, who they can reach out to in a time of need or crisis. And this is the backup plan. So this slide really, this section of the plan of care really talks about, in an emergency, who this individual feels comfortable with as their contact, as their emergency contact. So talking to them about, in any crisis or emergency situation, who they would like to be contacted, and walking through that, and including, you know, maybe what type of emergency under service, and then the contact name, phone number, and availability. As Alam and I were discussing these slides earlier, we talked about the idea that when this plan of care is completed, the individual should be able to walk away with a copy of this, because this was, you know, in the spirit of collaboration, the care manager and the individual who will be receiving the services fill this out together. So essentially, the individual will be walking away with a tool that helps them identify different resources and ways to deal with different triggers. And all the other resources that we'll go through is that we actually, as we go through the rest of these slides. So again, this area is really just a backup plan in case of emergency, who to call, and maybe in particular for what type of emergency they should be contacted for.
Mm-hmm. So the next section, speaking to natural disaster, really is one that that shines some light on some recent you know, things that have happened in our world. So with Superstorm Sandy, I mean, this is a section to document in the event of something as tragic as Superstorm Sandy. You know, it is a crisis. It's a different kind of crisis, but how does someone plan accordingly for that? So in order to ensure that the individual can have a plan of action for a time that unfortunately we can't necessarily plan for, this is the section to be able to put down all of that relevant information. Now, just to give a brief example, like I mentioned with Superstorm Sandy, in New Jersey on the provider end, clients, you know, at the time of everything happening, there was no such thing as a natural disaster plan. Nobody thought twice to do anything like that. But in essence, it is an emergency situation. What do we do? How do we stay prepared for it? So, you know, at the time of Sandy, we had clients that were in our system but were no longer in the area because they had to relocate, so on and so forth. So it really does give at least an opportunity to plan ahead in the event that something like that does happen. And all different kinds of thought processes that can go into that, such as, you know, knowing where your nearest emergency department is if you need it, or if you own a pet, knowing where the closest place to care for your animal is, things like that. So in order to make sure that the individual is covered all the way around.
Absolutely. Okay, and the final portion of the risk assessment and mitigation strategy is this risk assessment to justify intervention and support. So this is really about if throughout this assessment and plan of care process, you identify that the individual might be at risk, if there's a risk identified. And again, this is a risk that would not require a call to 911 or any emergency service. This is a risk that does not put the individual, there's no risk of harm to, imminent risk of harm to self or others. If it's not a situation that it causes emergency, you would use this assessment to fill out and plan for basically an assessment of how to work with the individual through this crisis. And so this is what this portion of the assessment is about. Again, I would encourage after the webinar to kind of review the template and just familiarize yourself with the different components of it. We're not going to go into too much depth today. There might be future training on this, but right now we're just kind of considering this as a basic template for if there was some sort of risk identified throughout the assessment process. And again, when I say risk, I want to be clear that this is a risk identified that does not require a call to emergency services or 911, okay?
Okay, so for these next upcoming slides, it's specific to consent and releases of information as far as this plan of care goes. So pretty much explaining what that means to the individual, letting them know what the purpose of this document is and who's going to be involved with this document, whether it be the care manager, the MCO, the HCBS providers, and ensuring that they consent to the release of information that's being compiled through the plan of care, and identifying who those individuals are that the client is releasing information to. So jotting down here the specific name, phone number, address, and information for those services where they're going to be conducted, in addition to anybody else that may be sharing the plan of care. So that's the gist of this slide. Now the next slide is going to contain signatures. Now anyone that's in attendance at the first meeting while the plan of care is actually being compiled, there's room for them to sign here. And as Meg mentioned, there's always room to add additional boxes if needed. Now, the individual, the care manager, and the HCBS provider are the three parties that are mandated to sign this plan of care. Other than that, if you have an additional supporting party that's there, another provider that happens to be present, that there's also room for them to sign there as well.
So I'm going to talk about this section very briefly. Section 9 is all about approved services, and this is the section that the managed care organization is responsible for filling out. So that's really all we need to know about this, that it's the managed care organization's responsibility for completing this in order to move forward with the plan of care.
And the next section is explaining the individual's rights through the while receiving behavioral health, home, and community-based services. So just running through some of them, that the client has been informed that they are eligible to receive these services, that they understand that they could choose to remain in the community and receive these services as designated in the plan of care, that they understand that they have a choice, that they can pick any provider in their network that has been notified of the provider's availability, and that they understand that the right to be free of abuse, neglect, and any kind of exploitation, and to report any of these items of abuse at any given time, and that they understand that there's a grievance and appeal process if it ever came to that. And so this is really where the client signs off on this, the care manager signs off on this, and just to ensure that the client is aware of what their rights are.
Absolutely. Okay. So this section in particular is really about talking with the individual who's going to be receiving the services about abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So it's really important during this section to talk through the different definitions, make sure that the individual is understanding what would qualify as all of the different types of abuse, neglect and exploitation, and making sure that they understand and know who they can identify as a safe person. At the bottom of this section, you'll see that there's a section to identify individuals that the client can reach out to if they believe they're at risk of harm or experience of abuse or neglect, and both in the home and in the community, who they can reach out to. So this is really developing a safety plan, just a very basic safety plan, and establishing an understanding with the individual about these different issues, making sure they understand what is meant by psychological abuse, making sure they understand what is meant by neglect and exploitation, and making sure that they feel comfortable and that they're able to identify someone both, if at home or if in the community, they can reach out to if any of these things is to occur in their life.
Okay. So very basic slide. It highlights the importance of communication, collaborating with the MCOs and the HCBS providers as a care manager. And this should help develop a communication plan to share the plan of care that these parties should, in fact, come up with some way that they can continuously remain in touch with regards to the progress of the client and with the clients themselves, of course. So just stressing the concept of collaboration and integration in this whole process, and being able to keep open lines of communication to relay any changes or updates that may occur throughout the time. And I know that we just ran through this, so I just wanted to make a quick plug that if anybody has any questions, I want to ensure that you're aware that the chat box there, we have the availability to intercept these questions, so please feel free to send them our way, and hopefully we can do our best to answer as many of them as possible. And for those that we do not have answers to immediately, we'll do our best to touch base with who we need to in order to get the proper information delivered to you in a timely fashion.
Thank you. Okay. So again, we are wrapping up the content for today, but I just wanted to stress that there are future training opportunities. We will be repeating this training next Wednesday from 2 to 3. And we will be doing our final installation, the third and final part of this webinar series. That will be a crosswalk and a discussion of the different services that are available. That will be next week on both Thursday and Friday. If you're wondering where to register, you can head to our website, MCTAC.org, and you can click on the events section, and you should be able to register for the webinars there. Again, as I stressed earlier, we will be recording this webinar, and we'll be posting the slides as well as the recorded webinar on our website. However, since we are offering this a second time next week, the slides and recording will not be available until after the second version of this webinar today. So just have a little patience. We'll get those up there, but we do wait until we complete the trainings before we post them on our websites. And finally, I just wanted to encourage everyone, we do have, MCTAC does have an email address where we collect all of the questions that come in, and we do review it on a very regular basis. If we, as MCTAC, are unable to answer any questions, we always make sure to pass along the question to the appropriate individual or party, whether that be the state. So I would encourage you all to send any questions there. We haven't gotten a ton of questions in today, so I don't think we're going to have any time for Q&A, but I'll give it maybe 30 more seconds just to see if we get any questions in. I know we have Joe on the line. Thank you, Joe, for joining us. So, and I'm not seeing any more questions.
Thanks, Megan, and I'm just here to back you up. So
thank you. Thanks a lot. And I'm just going to reach out to Morgan, our wonderful host. Morgan, are we missing any? We're not seeing any questions. So hold on one second. Thank you.
Okay, so it looks like we have some questions coming in. So let's see. So one of the questions is, how do we note in the plan that these services are needed but not accepted by the client? It's That's a good question. Where could that be notated?
Joe, might you know off the top of your head where that could be notated?
No, off the top of my head, I don't. I was kind of looking back through the plan document.
We can, so again, all of these questions, I just want to, I want to make sure everyone knows, we collect all of these questions that come in, and whether or not we're able to answer them on the webinar, we do get them answered, and we're putting together a frequently asked questions document. So again, if we're not able to answer this on the webinar today, we definitely will get back to this. Okay, so our next question that we do have is the expectation that this template will be completed electronically or by hand?
Joe, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it should be able to be completed electronically. Is that correct?
Yeah, you could do it either way, but you're eventually going to want to have it in electronic fashion. It has to be shared with the plan. It also has to be shared with the HCBS providers. So, you know, electronic is the preferred format.
The most ideal. Okay. Okay.
Okay. And we did have a question, Joe, about where to find the New York State Care Management Assessment. And I believe what that individual meant is the New York State Community Mental Health Assessment. So, Joe, could you help us out and direct us to where they could find that?
I will have to get with Don's group on where we have that located. I know we have had some screenshots available of that, but I don't know that the document itself has been publicly distributed. I think it's only been distributed to the actual health homes themselves. So let's put that on the list, and we'll follow back up with Don's group.
Will do. We'll put that on our list. All right, I think with that, we're going to close up our question and answer section. I want to thank everyone who joined us today. Thank you, Joe, for joining us and offering your expertise. And thanks to my colleague, Alam. And thank you for you all for joining. We'll be posting this sometime next week, so check back in to MCTAC. And we hope to talk to you all soon for our final webinar series on the plan of care and description of services.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.